Why is the word emotion or emotional such a bad word? Why does it get such a bad reputation? As women, we are criticized for being too emotional if we express our feelings about things. Men are not allowed to feel anger. Women are not allowed to feel anger or sadness. Why do we demonize such normal and natural actions or reactions in the body? Suppression of emotion leads to all kinds of disharmony in the system, regardless of how someone identifies. In this week's episode, I talk about emotions and how healthy expression of emotion is a cornerstone in your reproductive health. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I am an Eastern medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your menstrual health, offering period solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. In this week's episode, I am tackling the elephant in the room, and we're talking about emotions. So, why is it that the word emotion gets such a bad rap? Like, if you say the word emotion or emotional, people call to mind an overdramatic female being like angry or irritable or sobbing uncontrollably and dealing with an emotional roller coaster. So one of the memes that I share jokingly on my social media, I would say probably 2 years ago now, and I think I've referenced this meme before because it really does dovetail into so much of the work that I do. But in that meme, there are several boxes, and this character in the boxes, if you go to my social media page, you'll see what I'm talking about. But this character goes through a full spectrum of emotions. She is happy one minute and angry the next and sobbing and her hair's on fire. And and we're talking about in the meme anyway, it's talking about, well, do you feel like this during your period? But it actually speaks to a bigger issue that anytime somebody talks about feeling anything, our culture puts it in a box and says that it's not appropriate to talk about. That creates a lot of problems. Anyone who works in the mental health profession can completely vouch for this. And we're seeing it, especially after the pandemic, at epidemic levels. We just kind of had to soldier on and push through and, get through a fairly traumatic experience for the vast majority of people at one level or another anyway. And we really haven't had a container with which to talk about it in. And, even beyond that shared collective experience, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, there was this expectation that you were to be seen and not heard, right? The parents were talking, you did interrupt. And I mean, while there's a social courtesy aspect to it, there was this reinforcing of the fact that I wasn't in a position to really have my voice heard. And I found that as an adult, it would manifest itself in some crazy ways. Like I would repeat myself in a conversation if I didn't feel heard. So if for any reason I felt like my voice was falling on deaf ears or people were distracted while I was talking to them, or they weren't responding in a way that I felt was congruent with what I was talking about, I would repeat myself. And and I can tell you that my husband finds that obnoxious, and it's something that I've had to work very hard at. But I've had different times in my life where, and I'm speaking from personal experience, where I felt like my expression of voice was not embraced. And early on in my career as a young woman coming into the workforce, I had that reinforced for me in a professional setting when I was told, if you're going to be successful as a woman in a business setting, you have to think, you have to believe, you have to know, but you can never feel. So these kinds of narratives permeate our culture. And, while we could talk about this in a much broader way from both, well, not even binary, like from an everybody expressing their identity and their voice kind of perspective, right? There is this understanding at a variety of levels that emotions are allowed to be expressed. And the part that's so messed up about that is, the more I think about it, it just makes me crazy, is like our emotions are literally our sensory system and our ability to delineate between something being safe or not being safe, or a pressure release valve to be able to deal with experiences in our life, because that kind of energy ends up being all bottled up. And the more we bottle, the more it starts to show up in the physical body. So if we bottle, it can show up as menstrual stuff. If we bottle, it can show up as recurrent headaches or joint pain or things like this. And that we don't make that connection or that association at the time. We just go into the doctor and go, "Hey, doc, I'm having a hard time sleeping at night and my neck hurts." Right. And we don't talk about it in terms of, well, do you have any big stressors that are happening in your life right now? Right. So anytime people work with me, I jokingly will say that we start with the conversation about the physical symptoms that are showing up, and we'll talk about, their period or their period symptoms or their PMS leading up to it or whatever. But sometimes my clients kind of laugh, or they're surprised by the fact that maybe we'll talk about their actual period and their PMS symptoms for like less than 10 minutes of the appointment, and then the rest of the appointment, we're talking about what's going on in their life. Sometimes I'm providing resources and tools of other places for them to go to get the kind of support they're looking for, because I'm not a clinical therapist, right? And I never claim to be. And I tell my clients, like, while I'm a safe place to share things and to park information, and actually everything happening in your life helps me help you, there are times where other kinds of professionals need to come into the conversation because you need their special toolkit in addition to mine in order to live your best life, right? So it's not unusual for me to, maybe one appointment, we spend most of the time talking about the body symptoms and not touch on what's going on in the life at all. Sometimes from 1 month to the next, the period symptoms change so drastically that I can't help but ask the question, "So, what's going on in your life right now?" Because the body is expressing the fact that there are big emotions going on. Emotions are enough to trigger mid-cycle period letdown. I've had clients who, maybe they're having an issue with their partner, or they're dreading a conversation with their partner, and all of a sudden their cycles get shorter, or they spot around ovulation, and then it's just like spotting all month long because they have this pent up energy that's robbing the rest of their system of the energy it needs to fully execute the cycle in an appropriate way. maybe somebody's dealing with grief, right? So, I see this a lot with people who have had miscarriages, for example. If they are just kind of pushed into this position of, all right, well, we're just going to try again next month. And they're not given the space to grieve and actually feel all of the things that are coming up in their body at the time, or they feel so ashamed that their body didn't show up for them in the way that they anticipated, and they're dealing with the sadness around the loss. There can be so much to unpack around that it's more than one menstrual cycle and then get back on the horse and try again. Those emotions can actually stand in the way of them being successful and conceiving again. So our emotions drive so much of what it is that we do, how we experience the world, how we show up, how we're able to show up. We discount how powerful our emotional body is in the expression of health. And this is one of the things about the allopathic model that makes me absolutely crazy is the allopathic model pulls our body apart, okay? We go to siloed experiences in order to seek care. So if we have, I'm going to keep coming back to a miscarriage, and I am sorry if this is triggering, but I feel that this really powerfully illustrates the point where you have had this experience, you have had a loss, and they send you to the gynecologist for the physical follow-up. And maybe you don't end up with all of the resolution there that you need. And so then they send you to another specialist to look at your hormones. So, like an endocrinologist, for example. If you have a lot of grief around it, they're going to send you to a mental health professional. All of these people are separate people. They're not all in one place. All of them are looking at their isolated parts of your body, right? So even your mental health professional is looking at how you're coping with the situation, how you're unpacking all of that stuff, but they're not concerned with the physiology of all of it. I mean, maybe there are practitioners out there, and if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I'm someone that is a mental health professional that also does the physiological part, please reach out to me because I would love to interview you on the show. I have plans to interview practitioners that cross that bridge because I think it is so, so important. Because in my viewpoint, that is the definition of an integrative practitioner, right? Recognizing that the physical body, the way things are showing up in your system, has a spiritual and emotional component. They are not pieces you can just pull apart. This is not ingredients in a cookie recipe. You are the whole cookie. I had a mentor at one point in my life that said, your body is the movie projector of your life. And so sometimes some of the bad shit that happens earlier on in your life stays playing in the background until you resolve it, until you address it, until you come face to face with it. And oftentimes you need other people in your healing village to help you along on that journey. And that's where I see the work that I do step into that space because women really hold a lot of their emotions in their womb space. It's the seat of your identity. People just shove and pack things in there. It can stand in the way of fertility. It can stand in the way of healthy menstrual function. It's the reason why I truly believe that pelvic steaming is just so damn powerful in terms of helping to heal gynecology related issues. It's not the only reason, but I do feel that it has a really powerful influencing factor because of how it moves energy and fluids and chi in the body. So we treat the word emotion like it's a dirty word, and it's a natural expression. It is a normal part of being human. It does not matter how you identify, what you were born with for biological parts. You are an emotional being. And in a business space, women are conditioned. Conditioned is the right word. Our society conditions us to not feel, to only use our cerebral function. And you know what? It makes it hard for sexual function. In so many women, there is such a fucking disconnect between their brain that lives in their head and how they feel in their intuitive space that it's like they live on two different planets and they don't live in the same body. It makes it hard to be aroused. It makes it hard to have an orgasm. It makes it hard for the period to show up and to not have issues that way. Incontinence can be an issue. Like, there are so many things that can show up when we separate our cerebral function and our feeling function. And because of our cultural container, we are conditioned to do that. And I find that as women, and again, I'm talking about assigned at birth biology, okay? So as women, when we learn to really tap into our intuition, feel into our body, and answer the male, if you will, with how things feel in our body and not how they come out of our brain or what even may seem logical in that moment. Because there are a lot of us, and I'm raising my hand as I'm saying this. I've got a lot of Capricorn in my chart. I'm an Aquarius, Sun, and Moon. Okay. There's a lot of intellectual headspace in my chart. So I see you for anyone who is listening to this that goes, yes, I live in my brain a lot. When you live in that space, a lot of times you will try to logic your way out of things. And that's honestly your ego trying to make something fit into a box. And maybe your ego brain that is making that decision, you're like, oh, all of these things line up. Logically, this makes sense. And inside your gut is screaming, no, go in the opposite direction. Like, we are conditioned to not listen to that. And that totally fits in with this emotional picture, because if we feel into that space and we listen to that space and we make decisions from that space, it's an aligned place to be. As the world happens around us, we naturally, from that space, will have emotions that will come up. Maybe something makes you really angry. Maybe you need space to grieve. And that grief is so complex that you have to have time to really sit with, well, am I angry about this? Am I sad about this? Am I frustrated? Am I disappointed? Is my heart aching because there was so much joy leading up to this and now I feel like it's been ripped away from me? Like, you need to have time to unpack all of that. It's just like the word jealousy. I can't remember what session I was sitting in on, but I always took this kernel with me that jealousy is a compound emotion. It is the mixture of fear and anger. And I never thought about jealousy, the word jealousy, in that way until it was unpacked for me that way. And I'm like, wow, our system, our body wisdom is so brilliant that our feeling body can actually have compound or complex responses to things coming in at us. But we haven't been taught, just like we haven't been taught basic body literacy. Like, here's day one of your cycle. Everything else happens based on that. You could have emotional things or fatigue things or, fill in the blank things happen at this point or this point, and that's normal, right? So that also feeds our emotional body, because if we're telling ourselves that we're failing and we have this voice in our head that's shit talking us because we're tired, but we don't realize that it's actually just a normal, natural part of our cycle. And we're tired in this one spot because our body is gearing up to do a big process. You can hold compassion for yourself in a totally different way. And having those emotions or having that fatigue or whatever, like you don't start to resent. Okay. See, I keep using all of these emotional terms. You don't start to resent your body and the way that it's showing up for you, right? Everything we understand through some sort of an emotional experience. It's kind of like if the tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear a sound, does it make a sound? Like, it's one of those kinds of brain puzzles. But think about it. We understand our world based on, does this feel safe? Does this not feel safe? Does this make me angry? Does this person make me not feel accepted? Does this situation feel hopeless? Right? All of those things are feelings. So it doesn't matter what you have for biological parts. We are feeling beings. And if we can honor that and step into that and acknowledge, we don't have to be happy that we're having certain emotions. Like, I don't feel happy if something makes me feel angry, right? But sometimes just acknowledging, like, this thing makes me angry totally diffuses the bomb and takes that powder keg explosivity out of the anger and reduces it down to, I am feeling this way because. And being able to understand that gives you a lot of power. Expressing that and being able to hold space for that keeps it from being bottled in your system, which will become and manifest itself as physical issues. So, for example, I see more people who have fibroids who also, and I'm not saying this is universal for everybody, I'm just saying in general, I see a significant connection between clients who come to me for fibroids and there being some suppression of who they are or their voice, or perhaps both, in their history. Whether it's been in a romantic relationship, in a child-parent relationship, a child-grandparent relationship, it does not matter. I have seen a huge connection between people who have fibroids and there being a suppression of emotional expression in some way. So that's just one example. I see it a lot. And your emotions are energy that get bottled in the system. And you can only cork that bottle for so long before the excess is going to runneth over. And when that when that moment comes, it can be an explosive kind of thing. It could be digestive issues, it could be reproductive issues, it could be bleeding issues. In some people, they can't hold the blood back and they bleed all the time. And their body is so weak because they have expended all of this energy to try to bottle and hold all this stuff, that by the time the cork comes out of the bottle and the genie is out, their physical body does not have the energy to hold back the floodgates and they just bleed. These are just some examples from a menstrual perspective, and I could give you tons more, but the point of all of this is you cannot separate your emotions and your physical symptoms. You just can't. And because they're intertwined with each other, your spiritual body, all of that. This is why, like, you'll hear me talk on and off about that voice inside your head, and that's the one that you hear the loudest. And so let's develop a healthier relationship with what it's saying to you. It's all connected because how you feel about yourself, how you feel about how you move through the world, how you feel in your relationships, how you feel interacting with the rest of the world. All of those things manifest themselves in your body. They show up as pain. They show up as menstrual dysfunction. They show up as digestive dysfunction. They show up as headaches. They show up as tension. They show up in a ton of different ways in your system. Pelvic steaming is so powerful as a support mechanism for these kinds of things because you are moving energy in the seat of where it all began. We hold a lot of our emotional identity and our creative energy and all of these things as women in our womb space. And you're literally uncorking the bottle and releasing all of this pent up garbage right from the source for your system to process and deal with. And every steam session helps you with that processing process. Another reason why sound healing called to me, right? Because to me, I see both being able to work together very synergistically. And it really gets to the root of our emotions are how we understand the world around us, how we make decisions about the world around us, even when we try to make them from a logical place. Our body wisdom will chime in, and you'll have a gut feeling that something's not a good idea or, you know, hindsight's 2020, right? So when you get older and you look back at decisions you've made in your life, you're like, if I had only listened to that little gut bell that was going off, going, danger, Will Robinson, this is not a good idea. But you do it anyway. And then you look back at it and go, yeah, well, if I had listened to my gut never lied to me. And that's the truth. Your gut never lies to you. It's because it's coming from that emotional space. So I leave you with this. Emotions are not a dirty word. Emotion, emotional, having emotions. Let's take the dirty word out of the word emotion. And let's look at it more as a guide. Our emotions are a guide. Does this feel good to me? Does this not feel good to me? Would it feel good if I did this? And really sit with those things. Make decisions from that place. Have interactions from that place. Because women aren't the only bodies that feel emotions. It is slightly more socially acceptable for women to be emotive than it is for men. However, we have plenty, just look at the internet. We have plenty of memes about wildly erratic emotional women. I have been told many times in my life and actually been passed over for promotion because I'm a woman and women are emotional. And they didn't think that a woman had the analytical capacity to be able to move into a certain types of positions, which I thought was horrific. And I was far more qualified than the next closest candidate. And I know I'm not the only woman that has been in that situation either. So let's take some of the stigma out of emotions and just accept the fact that if you are a human being, you have emotions. It's part of your guidance system. And if we can just learn to embrace that. Now, I'm not saying if you're angry, it's socially acceptable to go around hurting other humans. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that if you are angry, acknowledging that you're angry and actually sitting with that anger for a second and saying, well, what is it that's making me angry? Because other people around you don't make you angry. What they do is they set off a trigger for something inside of you that makes you have that emotion come up. There is somebody in my sphere of reference that their child will say to them, well, you're making me angry. And it's like, well, hold on a second. They aren't making you feel anything. Your body is generating that response. So why is your body generating that response? What about it is making you feel that way? And if we can take a step back in any of the big emotions, they don't have to be negative ones. But the reason why our culture demonizes emotions is more because of the uncomfortable ones, right? Women, anger is more of a masculine kind of energy. And so it's not as socially acceptable for women to be angry. It is more socially acceptable for us to cry. For men, it is less socially acceptable for them to cry, but is more socially acceptable for them to be angry. And we have both. We have all of these things because we are human. It does not matter what our assigned parts are. We are human. This is part of our guidance system. Okay. So I really felt like this was an important topic to talk about because we have a lot of health related issues that spin out of the suppression of emotions because our container, our society does not allow for us to feel anything. And I call bullshit. You are an emotional being, and that is okay. Sometimes you just need to hear somebody say, it's okay that you feel that way. And you're like, yay, I feel seen and I feel validated. Okay. So here I am. I am sitting here sharing this with you because you need to be validated in the fact that it is okay that you are an emotional being. How you handle those emotions is a skill. How you handle them, how you analyze them, how you break them apart, how you share them with the world, those are areas that people can work on building skill sets around. However, the fact that you have them means that you're alive. And I laugh because it's just like this is day one of your period, right? It's very basic body literacy stuff that we should have been taught when we were younger. And, maybe we didn't have the models in our life that could hold that kind of space for us. Whatever the reason is that we aren't given this information from the beginning, it is important wherever you are in your life right now to acknowledge it and to begin working with it in a meaningful way instead of shying away from, suppressing, and ignoring emotions that come up for you. Lean into them, look at them. Why am I feeling this way? What is making me feel this way? Why is this coming up for me right now? I have had a huge journey to becoming a podcaster, and I'm just going to be really frank with you. Becoming a podcaster was really hard for me because having my voice heard in this way was something that brought up a lot of fear in my body because I never felt like my voice was worth being heard. And I have done a lot of work around that topic. And it is why I sit here today and why my voice cracks as I'm saying this. So I think it's very important to acknowledge said voice crack because I have had to do a lot of my own work around, well, why is it that I'm afraid of people hearing my voice? And I've decided that this information that I have in my system is so much bigger than me. And I am just the conduit with which to share it with the world. So my voice is important and my voice needs to be heard because other people need to hear what I know in order to be able to live their healthiest and best lives, to reduce their menstrual symptoms, to thrive in their intimate relationships. Your suppression of emotion literally makes it so that you can't orgasm. That is a problem. Women already struggle to orgasm. We have way more nerve endings than anatomical men do. We have 8,000 nerve endings. We should be incredibly orgasmic. And yet, there is a staggering number of women that report that they are unable to orgasm when they are being intimate with their partner. There is a reason for that, folks. That happens because we suppress our emotions. We feel shame around being an emotional body. We have a disconnect between our brain and our body. We're not given enough time to get into our body in order to be able to have this kind of energetic expression with our intimate partners. So emotions are a big fucking deal. They're a big deal. And I'm using the explicatives because I swear, for emphasis and clarity, I had a client that said that to me once, and I'm like, yes, sister, that's it right there. I swear, for emphasis and clarity. So emotions are a big fucking deal, folks. A big deal. And if we ignore them, we are shutting down part of our light. We are shutting down part of who we are, and we are opening ourselves up for massive health problems, reproductive problems, heart cardiovascular problems, migraine, like you name it. The more we suppress, the more it shows up in our physical body. They are intricately connected, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist, herbalist, sound healer, and Chinese nutritional therapist, Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment with Adrienne for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter to get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like us and follow Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.